What's going on in the EU-SSR, Stephen?
Oh, well, this is quite terrifying. I remember they touch upon some of this when we were in the Parliament years ago. That some individuals, and I remember meeting Varoufakis actually. So Varoufakis is
interesting character.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I mean, he does come off and say that he is a communist and then a socialist. And I had a long discussion with him. If you think 30 minutes, 35 minutes with a former finance minister for Greece in the European Parliament, sat down, generally nice guy. I mean, we got on. He realised I was one of Farage's lot. Didn't like Farage, but people told me that I'm an all right bloke. So he was able to have a conversation with me. And at that time, there were a couple of things that really kind of got his goat. The first thing was obviously what happened in Greece, in which the European Union effectively used organisations like Goldman Sachs to suppress the political will of the Greek people to actually kind of leave.
Greek was entirely a sacrificial lamb
Yeah.
for the EU project.
They were devastated. Unemployment was sky high. 80% youth unemployment or 70% youth unemployment. People were literally eating out bids, giving their kids away. It got that bad, all to try and save the euro. And as a consequence of that, he had a choice. And when he came into power, where I challenged him, was when, why did you not allow yourself to leave the euro and just let all your bonds go? Just let the economy collapse, but at least you're out of the euro. Yeah. And he said, effectively, many in the government were threatened by the EU with legislation that they would introduce that would actually make them all effective criminals in one way or another. And also, they applied the power of what he called the supranational wealth, or the IMF and others, that would say that they would not allow this to happen. So he, rather than fight for that, with a political party that was of the left, regarded as quite extreme left, every single one of those people that said, we will fight this, buckled. And they allowed the Greek economy to go, which is why I often say to yourself, when we get a political party or a movement like Farage's Reform, the pressure being applied on them, or the way that we'll give you a nice job, get a House of Lords, become an MP, they're actually just trying to twist your arm by giving you money.
Well, the international power structure has a lot of levers it can pull.
So they do all sorts of things on that. So that was the general conversation we had. But I was always intrigued by himself, how he said that political leaders would be used and laws would be used against to threaten the political leaders. And then you look across what happened in the European Union. We saw in Austria, they've effectively got rid of two right-wing prime ministers, including a young chap now in Kurz, who's just disappeared, just resigned. I've gone.
Quite good he was.
And he was very, very good, and he was standing up against them. I don't think so. He's now no longer involved. We see in Germany the AfD being banned. We've seen what they've done with Marie Le Pen, with charges that literally every other MEPs group in the European Parliament were doing, in terms of being able to use EU money to fund.
Well, and that's when they're not just outright reversing the election results, like was it Romania?
Yeah, and then they do that, and so. I've come across one other aspect about it that you've seen, and that is this, and I might need this, which is, hang on, we'll go. Let's go back up to what he's saying in here. No, where's Varoufakis?
If you go back on the new tab and click the forward arrow, there you go.
All right, we got it back on it. So Varoufakis comes in, I follow him, it says, our rulers here in the liberal West, I love the way that he uses the liberal West, have homed into a way of turning a person into a non-person. And I think of non-personal. I think of Dostoevsky. I think of Orwell, obviously, but we also look at Aldous Huxley in numbers of books where we've got movies recently, dystopian movies, where they're effectively a non-person. Now, this guy is Hussein Dogru. He's a German journalist, although he was born in Turkish, but not a dual citizen. So he has got German citizenships. And the EU authorities have found a novel, and he uses an immensely cruel way of punishing him for his coverage and views on Palestine. Now, many of us will have a very different view on Palestine. Some are very pro-Israel, some are very anti-Israel, others might argue a balance in between. But this particular person was not very pro-Israel. He's certainly very, very pro-Palestinian, and we'll come to that. So what they've done from him is they've used an unused directive which I thought was, I really did think it was a kind of not really being used at all, that allows Brussels to sanction any citizen of the EU it deems to be working for Russian interests.
And who defines that? The EU.
Exactly. And that's the point. They looked to his website and podcast, and his podcast was used on Ruptly. Not all the time. It was just a few episodes of his podcast were used as clips on Ruptly.
Is that a Russian YouTube or something?
Yeah, Ruptly was part of the Russian TV channel that was
RT.
Oh, the RT thing.
RT. So it was like an RT factual show that they had, and I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure whether I was on it once or twice or something like that. But they had different individual presenters here in oddly enough, the towers where Reform's head offices are.
Oh, Millbank.
In Millbank. Yeah. So the RT's offices were in Millbank before they were banned, and almost all of the people working for RT were British. And some very, very good journalists. They had a good one or two Russians who were on there in the UK. But Ruptly was one of the channels. Possible I've been on it. Possible lots of people are on it because it was seen in those days as being perfectly okay. Anyway, he just had a couple of his podcasts in it. So actually, having said that, the EU is probably going to look me up now and ban me as well. So maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. But they've now said that because Ruptly used his podcast, he was therefore a Russian asset.
This reminds me of when they brought in all that anti-terror legislation, and it ended up being used by councils on people who put their bins out on the wrong day.
Yes.
You know, if a law exists, it will be used in the most perverse way possible.
That's right, and that's the kind of what worries me. So I'm going to run through some things in here. His bank account is frozen. If you give him cash to buy groceries or make rent, I'm going to come to Claire Daly when she deals with this. She puts it out really specifically. But essentially, he can't do anything. He can't live. He can't leave the country. He can't enter the country. He can't buy food. And if you give him food, you're actually aiding and abetting a terrorist.
So this is exactly the same as what happens in China. A friend of mine went there recently, just as a tourist. But in order to, it's Alipay is their payment system. It's their digital. They don't have cash. It's digital currency there. And for some reason, and this wasn't like a huge issue for him, but his Alipay account got frozen because of suspicious activity. And he was there. And he was by himself, and he was just there like, okay, I can't get any public transport. I can't buy any food. I can't pay for anything. I'm in the middle of China. I don't speak Chinese. What the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
Got sorted, fortunately. But you imagine living in that country as, or a country like that has those kinds of conditions, and wanting to speak out against what's happening in your country, as we have done about Britain today, where the state can just turn off your ability to live, as you just said, Stephen. I mean, that's a terrifying prospect.
What would you even do if this happened to you? I mean,
you'd just be standing there like...
Yeah, you basically stand. You stand there.
You would have no choice but to turn to crime to survive, would you? I mean, what else could you possibly do?
You couldn't do anything other than turn to crime to survive. Yeah. But any criminals that were working with you would suddenly become an asset of the Russian state, and they would face it. And maybe then we'd actually end up with criminality ending in this country, because we regard everybody as that. But one of the elements that I say particularly concerning about this is the only way that he can challenge this, because there's no trial. And I'll come to his page at that.
Trial?
There's no trial. Is he has to go to Brussels. But he's not allowed out.
How does he get there?
He's not allowed out. He's not allowed out of Germany to go to Brussels to challenge it.
Just nuts.
This is absolute... This is Soviet Union level stuff.
Yeah. So here he is.
All in the name of democracy. All in the name of preserving democracy.
So this is the chap here. And he's, as I say, his name up there is Hussein Dogru. The EU sanctioned me and my media outlet for covering Palestinian protests in Germany, and it's part of a growing authoritarianism, militarism cloaked in language of fighting disinformation and defending democracy. And this is one of the things that I get quite fearful about. Obviously, I didn't like what the guy was saying on the stage in Glastonbury, and I certainly don't like him saying about want our country back and the other phrases that I was looking at. But other than saying incitement to kill, I'm actually a free speech absolutist.
I think the IDF can handle themselves.
Yeah, I mean, my personal view is I don't think the IDF are really worried about him. If any one of those kind of middle-aged white older people in Glastonbury were ever going to try that have been gone in seconds.
Yeah.
So if the IDF would that have been Gone. Sorry. No, another coffee.
I mean, they're quite good at dealing with crowds of people.
That's right. They're pretty good at. An angry Liberal Democrat from Winchester is not really going to worry the IDF.
No, I think that's right.
We do have this kind of insane individuals on there, and he is entitled to say what he likes, as I say, within the kind of framework of not genuinely inciting violence, and that's why I'm against the Lucy Connolly decision.
It's interesting that they're attacking somebody on the left, because if they were attacking somebody on the right, we'd be up in arms about this.
Absolutely.
And we'd be saying to the left, they can come to and do this to you next, and they wouldn't listen, they would be cheering for it.
Yeah.
But it is one of their own now, and the people on the right are smart enough, such as yourself, you're doing this segment, to say, if they can do this to this guy, they can do it to any of us.
Yeah, and we've been saying this is exactly what they've been doing to us. After all, we've been facing cancellations. This show was cancelled on YouTube.
Yeah.
Carl was
I've been
cancelled.
Hope Not Hated, personally.
You've been Hope Not Hated.
Yeah.
I really just lost for words of what Hope Not Hated could mean there. I kind of think it's some horrible meme.
Yeah. They ran a hit piece on me, but
Oh yeah, I know
You get the whole hit piece
on
to
you.
yourself, did you?
It was me and one other in the same piece, and there were consequences for the other chap, but I was quite lucky.
I mean, it's basically the based Oscars at this point, so...
Yeah. You were actually wanting to get on the Hope Not Hated.
I read the report. I was in it.
You were finally in it.
Yes, I'm finally in it.
Finally in the Hope Not Hated.
Yes, most pleased with that. I'd like to get an individual piece if you're listening.
Yeah.
What you want is what Matt Goodwin gets, which is like a 3-page spread.
He had a Hope Not Hate three-page spread.
Yeah, which is wild because Matt's not even that radical. Like,
what the hell?
Yeah.
I don't even look, but this is the point. He's left wing, and he's come in here, and he comes down. He talks about in this background how he had a company, and that he was nothing happened to his podcast until Tagesspiegel alleged, without evidence, that they were coordinating protests in the service of the Russian goal to destabilize Europe. Now, this is what I'm getting really worried about. I mean, by all means, I accept that Russia will have an intelligence network out there that wants to destabilize certain elements of
well, they're going to have to be
Europe.
really on their game if they're going to beat our own governments at it.
But but there's no doubt that we're doing the same in their country. Yeah. I mean, this is what spycraft is all about. Yeah. So we're doing it in China. We've been doing it in other countries. We helped organize coups all over the world. This is no difference than what we're doing. But they're saying that this individual's program, and that the next thing, Anthony Blinken gets involved and said that his organization, RED, was a covert influence operation. Again, with no...
the US State Department never engages in covert influence operations.
No, they never do anything at all. They sit there also with the IDF having a cup of tea going, oh, no, let's have a coffee, a milkshake.
It's interesting, just quickly, not to be, it's so cliched at this point, but this is literally like we've always been at war with East Asia, using that as like Russia, Russia as the the ultimate boogeyman to justify any
and I think that's
at home.
I kind of have this little worry about me, but that only the other day I was on I think it was Talk actually with some expert about immigration. I'd never actually seen above him. He was a quite nice guy. He spoke pretty well, obviously military background, suddenly saying that Russia was behind all the illegal immigrants coming in.
I saw the same story, yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, hang on a minute, covering this since 2014-15 when I was in the camps in France, I didn't see many Spetsnaz behind them going, oh Lord, go to Somalia or not go to England. No, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I've got the Western Mediterranean front, the Eastern Mediterranean front, coming over from Libya. Now they're trying to suggest that it's the Wagner Group.
Oh,
who
of course.
are all working through Africa, helping and aiding these people to be able to get
podcasting. Is that the claim? The Wagner Group are behind people doing podcasting in Europe?
No, immigration.
No. Illegal migration.
Illegal migration. So they're all, I'm just saying, we've just gone off on the
Well, wait, how does that work? So you're telling me that the Wagner Group got jobs at the Home Office and stamped 8 million visas over the space of 5 years?
They clearly did. My personal view is I think the Home Office then clearly are part of this Russian kind of disinformation campaign to destabilise Europe.
I do love, by the way, when I saw that story, the cognitive dissonance, because it's like, on the one hand, these are innocent refugees and diversity is our strength, and on the other, they are a Russian asset used to destabilise our country. Yeah. So which is it? Pick one.
And that's right. And Wagner Group is obviously out there now helping them all, providing them routes. I'm thinking, hang on, if you are there in Somalia, I don't really need your help.
Yeah.
I've already got my own people, smugglers, who are going to come along and get me up there. I've been doing this for years.
And then the British government will give me a 4-star hotel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a thing. They're going to, like you say, Charlie, they're using everything to suggest that it's all about Moscow and Russia. And I'll say, no doubt there are elements to it, but it's just not every aspect of our society. So they got this hybrid war, and then we have the European External Action Service's annual Foreign Information and Manipulation and Interference report. So I've just been looking these up because it's something I hadn't come across. And there we are. European law has a piece of council legislation, which is a decision made by the Council of Europe, the European Council, which is the leaders of the countries. They made the decision. They got a restrictive measures in view of Russian destabilizing activities, and it's been in force, and it's been consolidated on the 22nd of May this year. So I didn't open it up in terms of all the reports down there that you can go into, but this is essentially it. It lists at the beginning, Russia bad. 2013, we're going right back. Then we've got a number of cases with Litvinenko, and so we've got disinformation. So it sets out what the European Union thinks is really bad about Russia. And as you go down, it just goes on. Oh, hang on, there we go. There, instrumentalization of migrants in there. They've been involved in doing that. So it keeps going. And then it adopts this measure that says, if you're doing any of the following actions, planning, directing, engaging, directly or indirectly, or otherwise facilitating the obstruction, undermining a democratic political process, including holding elections, attempting to destabilize or overthrow the constitutional order. If you start going through that, that's essentially what people who oppose governments do every single day. It's what channels like this do. It's what you do in speeches. So almost anything.
Any political activity.
Supporting or indirectly supporting the movement would fall within the category
they've given
of this.
themselves the power to basically unperson everybody who is in the slightest way a threat to them.
And all they've got to say is that you are connected with the Russian Federation. So that would mean, for example, opposing the Ukraine war or saying I want peace in Ukraine, because that could be the mouthpiece for Putin. Well, obviously that's an allegation that's thrown at people. If you're not supporting Zelensky, then clearly you're a mouthpiece for you. So obviously Donald Trump and J.D. Vance fall within that. So it goes through, it lists where you can be, what sort of organizations you are, and it just goes on. And then it tells you all your funds from held by legal or natural banned, taken off you. And this goes on and on and on. Now, that I found when I started reading that, I was thinking, God, this is actually really, really oppressive, because you are now a non-person. You don't exist.
And they don't use it on terrorists or grooming gangs or drug lords.
Nope.
They use it on journalists.
They use it on this case, a journalist. And then this is the report by the third report exposing the architecture of it. And I'm going to go down here. Oh, did I not open?
You have to click on the.
I might have to, actually, because I thought maybe I can. So maybe I'll just lead on to this then, the galaxy. No, that's the journal. I did want to go back.
If you go back on there, there was a thing that said, click to see full PDF. You just click on that.
So I wanted to go on this full PDF.
Thank goodness I'm here, right?
So here we are. I mean, I've never particularly liked Kaja Kallas, I have to admit. She looks to me as though she's like a smiling devil. She's like the personification of, I will put somebody else to put a knife in the back of your neck, and I'll do it, and I'll say it was actually, you were doing it in the interest of justice
and democracy.
It's a quiet ones that sometimes are the worst. Anyway, you go through this, and this report is interesting for people who really get fascinated by this kind of idea of how they build it up. It talks about how elections were attacked by Russia. This is going back to the question of Romania, Moldova, Africa, lists through it. And then it goes through the introduction here of all the types of ways that we are countering this. And it has an East Stratcom task force set up to deal with ongoing disinformation. And when you look through the disinformation, again, we fall within it. this show would fall within that disinformation category if we opposed what they are. And they've got some trends, 38,000 channels, 320 odd organizations. So they build up a trends. And what they're doing with this document is legitimizing the kind of idea that we are looking carefully at this. We've identified these organizations, and therefore we can use this extreme legislation because we are kind, thoughtful, liberal people.
So why haven't they then? If they've identified all these legitimate targets, why haven't they done it? Why are they selectively enforcing it? Because they know that if they were to do it en masse, there would be such almighty pushback. So what they need to do is selective enforcement to send the message is, we can do this to any of you at any time, watch yourself.
That's exactly it, as we did with Lucy Connolly. They're just Russia. China now is a very big one, and it talks about other organizations. This is the sort of block of the architecture. I love the way that they try and put these little pretty pictures to basically say, we're just going to control whatever you think, how you think. And then this is the sort of organizations that they've put on this list. Now the red organization was, that is Ruptley, as one of the state-controlled outlets. And his little organization was around here. It might have been that one.
So is this just in the context of Russia?
Russia and China.
Right.
So if you look at China, I can't zoom in.
To be fair, they probably got the idea of this from China.
Yeah, possibly. If you zoom in on there, you look at like Phoenix TV. If you ever go to Hong Kong or China, you watch these. These are on their channels all the time, on their television shows in the hotels. So it's like their BBCs and things like that, small channels.
And I don't necessarily doubt that they are outlets of propaganda.
Of course. Yeah, but to the extent we argue that BBC is.
Yes.
And of course, you come into it and you get what I love it, EU News, part funded by the EU. Yeah. Isn't that a state organisation? And they come around and says, it's fine, it's good. Well, if China was saying exactly the same thing, wouldn't that be? It's fine, it's good that we've got all these people in the Uyghurs and they're not allowed to eat.
Yeah.
Because they're against, they've been working with the Brits and the Americans to undermine China.
This is the thing. I mean, James Burnham talks about this in The Managerial Revolution, but it's the way in which modern, mass and scale democracies, like the ones, or mass and scale systems, like democracy in the West, but also, whatever you want to call the Chinese system, and the Soviet Union, and also Nazi Germany, they all tend towards the same kind of structure and sort of behavior as, the state as an entity. Yeah. And I would prefer it, in this, what you're talking to us about, Stephen, the EU is indistinguishable from China. I'd actually prefer it if they were just honest about it. Yeah. I'd actually prefer it if there was an acknowledgement like, no, actually, we are all playing the same game here. Like, we are all doing the same thing. That would be preferable,
But to do so then would remove one of their great faces, that we are liberals and kind.
Yeah.
That we are doing this all in your own interest, and we're helping because we want everyone to benefit from it. When in reality, if it came back to saying exactly being honest, that we're as dictatorial as the Chinese. We have the same instincts as Putin. Mm-hmm. We just do it differently.
Yeah, and we lie about it more than they do. Like, let's be real for a second here. Like, because of the facade of liberalism that the EU holds up, I think that actually makes them more dishonest than the Chinese. Because the Chinese, again, whatever you want to say about their system, I certainly wouldn't want to live.
No, I wouldn't
in
want
a totalitarian surveillance
state.
Not
at all.
But at the very least,
I've seen what they've done to Hong Kong.
Yeah, but at the very least, it looks from the outside like, at some level, there is a concern for the national interest in the Chinese state, whereas in the EU and in EU member states, it's as though the state is explicitly oriented against the interests.
You're getting the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a really valid point, because a lot of people would say that we're getting the worst of both worlds.
Exactly. Yeah, we're getting the totalitarian surveillance state, and we're not even getting the national interest.
And there's a lot of people here. I'm looking at the time. A lot of people here. So this is, I don't know if you remember Claire Daly. I don't know if she'd done this one. I'm hoping it goes straight onto her. So Phidias Paniatou, I like him. He was like some sort of blogger or gamer. No,
yeah, I've come across him.
And became, and he's really radical and out there as an opponent of the European Union. But he is fun. But Claire Daly was another of the, she had no time for me, unfortunately, not like Varoufakis. She is a very big, strong Irish communist, independent MEP. And to be fair, there was a lot on the liberty and freedom of speech elements that I liked. Even some of her conversations on what Israel was doing or what the Americans were doing. You could see it from the right's perspective, where we could align in some ways. But she just would have no truck with anyone who wanted to have uncontrolled migration controlled like myself. We're all racist just because we're in it. But she makes a really good point.
The bedrock of democracy is freedom of speech. But it's not very good news. We are not the majority in the European Parliament that we want freedom of speech.
Words and ideas are weapons, and the European liberals are here to save us from that. And this is where the European Union's 17th set of sanctions comes into play. Because what you have here is sanctions targeting disinformation. Now, what was this disinformation and who were these people? Now, a few of them were actually Russians, but there was also a German blogger and there was a Turkish citizen who was a valid EU resident who was also sanctioned. And let's look at slap them with an EU sanction. And if you're targeted by an EU sanction, you don't hear the charges against you, you don't get a trial, you don't get a right to defence. You basically, the first thing you find out about this is a letter coming in your door telling you that your bank accounts have been frozen and that you're banned from entering or leaving the country. This is not just about speech. You mightn't care about whether someone was silenced for pro-Palestinian speech or whatever. That's not really important. You don't have to agree with the issues there, but you have to recognise the danger of what's going on here. Because if it's them today, it's you tomorrow.
And that's very good. Fair play to her.
And that is exactly my point.
Yeah.
This is why we should be very worried about when we're seeing on television the attacks against the individual. As I say, I don't like what he said. But Lucy Connolly was right to what she said. He was right to what he said in terms of the free speech element about it. Rise up and honestly say, let's go out and kill somebody tomorrow and do it there and then that's a different issue altogether. And I don't think Lucy Connolly fell within that categorization. I don't agree with everything that the Palestinian proponents say. I don't agree with everything.
I agree with very little of it, but also,
I don't agree with everything that the Israelis or IDF do. But I don't believe that I should have a sanctions hit on me because the assumption of the European Union is I want to control what you say. I mean, we didn't go into what the blogger dealt with. I mean, I couldn't really find much about him because he's literally disappeared.
It's dark. It's very dark.
He's literally disappeared. He's a human being existing somewhere in Germany who cannot get money from any source, can't buy anything. But here's the key point. You didn't even know it happened to you until he got a letter through the post. Imagine going through, you say, hang on, I can't get money from the bank. And then a letter comes in, you are now a non-person.
Yeah.
It's a non-person letter. We should be all seriously worried about how they're looking at this. And so I thought she was very powerful. She's no longer an MEP. I think she lost her position. But there's a couple of other things I look on there. Network effects. Again, this chap here, not entirely of the right, but again, he is more into the technology side of things, network effects. And he looks at this, he covered it, and I don't know why he's gone on that, but he did cover some other aspects about the weaponization of counter-disinformation to promote censorship. What sort of world are we in if we're in a liberal West when this can happen? And I don't know if you know Walter Kim at all. I find some of his things really interesting. But on the back of what Paul Thacker said in the New York Times, Biden ages a campaign, how did so many elected Democrats miss Biden's infirmity? He just puts out, in relation to this, Orwell thought naively that to pull off this reversal census from the Ministry of Truth would have to go back and change or erase the first headline.
David needs to.
Today we are so beaten down, distracted, dazed, that we don't even require this alteration. Our brains are the memory holes. And I just thought that's absolutely fascinating, that here we are every single day, we are facing an onslaught from all different organizations and arms of government to try and disarm us of what the truth is, to ensure that we don't think for ourselves, that when we do challenge them, we're deemed to be someone on the other side. And I do hope that when we get down to one of the key aspects of what the movement's doing, freedom of speech is somewhere we take
Absolutely.
this. Because this is the sort of area where if we're accepting what the European Union is doing, and don't forget, we're trying to get closer to them. What of our legislation is similar to that? I haven't even started pursuing that. I haven't got enough time. I'm trying to do enough on immigration.
Even if it is now, the ambition will be to make it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know we're conscious on time. It's 22 minutes past. But this, for me, I think is one of the really, really worrying aspects, not of just the European Union, but how it's going to be impacting ourselves. We should, despite all the antagonism that we get from the left, and they won't thank us for it. In fact, they would use it against us. I'm absolutely certain if they were in power, and do so to a certain extent, as we've seen with Lucy Connolly. But I do think that we should be better than them, bigger than them, and defend the ideas of freedom of speech, irrespective of whether I agree with their views or not, and somehow disarm this. I just don't know how we can.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.